February 22nd, 1943. Near Spitler, Tunisia, the morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky desert as Panzerabteilung 501 rolled through the positions recently abandoned by retreating American forces. Among the scattered equipment and burned-out vehicles, one tank sat intact. An M4A1 Sherman, registration number still visible, crew name painted on its turret, War Daddy II. The German tank crews approached cautiously. Intelligence briefings had warned them about this new American weapon. The Sherman had appeared at El Alamein just months earlier, giving British forces a decisive edge over Rommel's Afrika Korps. Now Germany faced this tank from two directions, British in North Africa and Americans in Tunisia. The first German soldier to climb aboard War Daddy II expected to find crude American workmanship, heavy steel welded together with typical industrial efficiency but little sophistication. What he found instead would challenge every assumption German military engineers held about American tank design. The interior was spacious. The controls responded smoothly. The engine, when they managed to start it, purred with mechanical confidence that reminded veteran tankers of automobile engines rather than temperamental military equipment. Within hours, orders came from high command. Transport this tank to Germany immediately. The Army Weapons Office at Kummersdorf wanted to examine it thoroughly. War Daddy II began a journey that would reveal more about American military philosophy than any intelligence report could provide. The contrast between German and American approaches to tank warfare had been developing for years, shaped by fundamentally different industrial cultures and strategic assumptions. German tank design emphasized technical specifications, armor thickness measured in millimeters, gun penetration calculated at various ranges, engineering solutions optimized for maximum battlefield performance. American tank design emphasized different priorities entirely: reliability, maintainability, production efficiency, logistical sustainability. The engineers at General Motors and Chrysler who designed the Sherman thought like automobile manufacturers because that's exactly what they were. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. War Daddy II arrived at Kummersdorf Proving Ground in March 1943 after a 4.5-day journey covering 350 kilometers from Tunis. German engineers marked the armor plates with chalk, noting thickness and angles for systematic testing. They measured the 50.8mm frontal glacis, sloped at 56 degrees from vertical. They examined the cast turret, the vertical volute spring suspension, the Continental R975 radial engine producing 400 horsepower. Then they drove it. The test reports, compiled over weeks of evaluation, documented something unexpected. The Sherman climbed test slopes that German Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks could not manage. The power-to-weight ratio of 13.3 horsepower per ton gave the 30-ton Sherman better climbing ability than heavier German tanks with similar power outputs. The engine never overheated during extended testing. The transmission shifted smoothly through its 5 forward speeds without the stiffness that plagued German designs. The tracks, rubber-blocked for reduced noise and improved ride quality, showed minimal wear even after hundreds of test kilometers. German test drivers noted the hydraulically assisted steering that made the Sherman easier to maneuver than any German tank in service. They praised the auxiliary generator that could power the turret traverse and radio systems without running the main engine, a feature that seemed almost luxurious, compared to German tanks where every electrical system depended on the main engine running. They marveled at the gun stabilization system, primitive by later standards but revolutionary in 1943, that allowed reasonably accurate fire while moving, something no German tank could achieve. The formal test reports remained cautiously technical, documenting specifications and performance metrics with bureaucratic precision. But photographs from Kummersdorf tell a different story. German soldiers posing on War Daddy II don't look triumphant. They look thoughtful, perhaps concerned. Some look almost dejected, as if recognizing that their enemy possessed advantages that German industry could not easily replicate. Albert Speer, Reich Minister of Armaments and War Production, took personal interest in these evaluations. As Germany's industrial capacity struggled under Allied bombing and resource shortages, Speer understood that American industrial methods represented a threat potentially more dangerous than any particular weapon system. The Sherman embodied mass production principles that Germany, with its craftsman-based manufacturing culture, had never fully embraced. By mid-1943, German forces in Tunisia faced overwhelming numbers of American Shermans alongside British armour. The Afrika Korps, starved of supplies and reinforcements, fought skillfully but could not overcome the arithmetic of industrial war. Every German tank lost was irreplaceable. Every Allied tank destroyed was replaced within weeks. The mathematics of attrition warfare favoured the side that could produce tanks faster than they could be destroyed. German tank crews in Tunisia learned to respect the Sherman not through propaganda or intelligence briefings, but through direct combat experience. American tankers might lack the years of training that German crews possessed, but their equipment worked reliably. When a Sherman took a non-penetrating hit, the crew stayed in the fight. When transmission problems occurred, field maintenance could repair them quickly. When engines needed service, standardized parts fit any Sherman, regardless of which factory had built it. The first Shermans captured operationally, not just War Daddy II sent for testing, but actual tanks pressed into German service, appeared with panzer units in Tunisia during the final desperate months of the North African campaign. German crews painted Balkan crosses on American tanks and drove them into combat against their original owners. These captured Shermans performed a function beyond their combat capability. They revealed to German soldiers that American engineering, often dismissed as crude and unsophisticated, had achieved something German engineering had not. Practical excellence. The German tank development program had followed a logical but ultimately flawed progression. The Panzer III, designed in the mid-1930s, mounted a 37mm gun, adequate for its era. When combat against heavier French and British tanks revealed this inadequate, Germany upgunned to 50mm, then longer 50mm. Each upgrade added weight. Each weight increase stressed the chassis, transmission, and suspension beyond original design parameters. The Panzer IV followed the same pattern. Originally designed as an infantry support tank with a short 75mm howitzer, combat experience demanded a longer, high-velocity 75mm gun. More armour was added. Weight increased from 20 tons to 25 tons. Transmissions designed for lighter vehicles failed under the increased stress. This pattern of incremental improvements, adding weight and complexity, without proportionally improving reliability, characterized German tank development throughout the war. Each generation of German tanks became more capable on paper and less reliable in practice. The Panther, developed in response to the Soviet T-34, exemplified this approach. Impressive specifications, catastrophic reliability. The Tiger, mounting the famous 88mm gun, dominated battlefields when it ran but spent more time undergoing maintenance than fighting. The Sherman represented a fundamentally different philosophy. American designers established performance requirements based on what could be reliably produced, maintained in the field, and sustained logistically across global supply lines. The specifications were modest compared to late-war German tanks. The 75mm M3 gun could not penetrate Panther frontal armour at any range. The sloped frontal armour could not resist Panther or Tiger guns at combat distances, but these limitations were accepted as trade-offs for achievable reliability and mass producibility. Continental Aircraft designed the R975 engine for civilian aircraft. Adapting it for tank use required relatively minor modifications. The 9-cylinder, air-cooled radial configuration meant no complex cooling system to fail. The 4-stroke design was mechanically simple and well understood by mechanics with automotive backgrounds. Maximum output of 400 horsepower occurred at 2400 revolutions per minute, well below the stress levels that shortened engine life in German tanks. The Ford GAA Veit engine, used in later Sherman variants, followed similar principles. 8 cylinders in V configuration, liquid-cooled but with simple cooling systems, producing 500 horsepower reliably. American automotive engineers applied lessons learned from millions of civilian vehicles to military equipment. Simple designs, conservative engineering margins, standardized components, emphasis on field maintainability. The transmission in the Sherman used technology proven in heavy trucks: 5 forward speeds, 1 reverse, manual but with smooth synchromesh that made shifting easier than in any German tank. The German preference for complex pre-selector transmissions in some designs, or crude crash gearboxes in others, reflected their different engineering culture. German designers optimized for maximum performance even at the cost of reliability. American designers optimized for adequate performance that could be sustained indefinitely. Suspension technology revealed the same philosophical divide. The Sherman used vertical volute springs, essentially large coil springs mounted vertically with each bogie unit. This system was simple, robust, easy to maintain, and used components that any industrial facility could manufacture. Track tensioning required simple adjustment. Replacing a damaged road wheel took 30 minutes with basic tools. The interleaved and overlapping road wheels on German Panthers and Tigers provided superior weight distribution and excellent cross-country performance on firm ground. But they collected mud that froze solid overnight in winter conditions. Changing an inner road wheel required removing up to 8 outer wheels first, a process consuming hours, even with trained mechanics and proper equipment. These seemingly minor differences compounded across thousands of vehicles and months of sustained operations to create decisive advantages. An American armored division could maintain higher operational readiness because maintenance was simpler and faster. German panzer divisions saw operational readiness decline throughout any campaign, as maintenance demands exceeded available time and resources. The tactical implications emerged clearly in Italy, where terrain amplified these differences. The Italian peninsula's mountainous terrain, narrow roads, and steep slopes created perfect conditions for testing cross-country mobility. Allied forces advancing north from Sicily in July 1943 encountered German defensive positions anchored on commanding heights. Taking these positions required armor support for infantry assaults up slopes that seemed impassable to tanks. The Sherman proved astonishingly capable. Its high power-to-weight ratio and well-balanced design allowed it to climb slopes that stopped heavier German tanks. Crews discovered they could traverse terrain that defensive planners had considered tank-proof. Mountain villages that Germans assumed could only be approached along narrow valley roads came under Sherman attack from unexpected directions. The tactical flexibility this mobility provided gave Allied commanders options that German defenders had not anticipated. German forces defending the Gustav Line in late 1943 and early 1944 watched Allied Shermans negotiating slopes and crossing terrain where German doctrine said tanks could not operate. Intelligence reports filtered back to German high command, describing American tank performance that seemed to violate engineering principles. How could a medium tank climb mountains? The answer lay not in specifications, but in design, philosophy. Albert Speer visited the Italian front in October 1944 as Allied forces ground northward through the Apennine Mountains. His official report to Hitler, filed in November 1944, stated explicitly what German tank crews already knew from experience. The Sherman climbed mountains German tank experts considered inaccessible to tanks. The 26th Panzer Division reported that Sherman cross-country mobility on level ground in the Po Valley was completely superior to German tanks. Sherman tanks drove freely cross-country, while German panzers remained restricted to trails and narrow roads. This admission from Germany's Minister of Armaments carried enormous significance. Speer was not a field commander prone to exaggeration or defeatism. He was an engineer and administrator responsible for German war production. His report to Hitler represented sober assessment of industrial and engineering reality. American tanks possessed advantages that German tanks could not match, not because German engineering was inferior in theoretical sophistication, but because American engineering priorities were better suited to the war being fought. The report continued with observations that must have troubled German military planners. Panzer crews wanted lighter, more maneuverable tanks with adequate firepower rather than heavier tanks with superior specifications. The pursuit of technical excellence in German tank design had produced vehicles poorly matched to operational requirements. The preference for heavy armor and powerful guns had created tanks too heavy for their drivetrains, too complex for field maintenance, too expensive for mass production, and too specialized for the varied conditions of actual combat. German tankers who captured Shermans and used them operationally reported consistent observations. The Sherman was reliable. It started every morning without the pre-operation checks required for German tanks. It ran all day without overheating or mechanical failure. It could be refueled and serviced quickly. Crews could perform basic maintenance without specialized tools or extensive training. These mundane advantages mattered more in sustained operations than impressive gun penetration statistics or thick armor. The Tiger units in Italy particularly appreciated captured Shermans converted to recovery vehicles. German recovery equipment struggled with the weight of Tigers and Panthers. Purpose-built German recovery vehicles were scarce, mechanically complex, and themselves prone to breakdowns. A Sherman converted to recovery duty by removing the turret and installing towing equipment proved remarkably effective. It could reach disabled vehicles across terrain that specialized German recovery vehicles could not traverse. Its reliability meant it was actually available when needed rather than itself requiring recovery. This pattern repeated across multiple theatres. German forces in Normandy after D-Day captured Shermans and pressed them into service. Some were used in combat, marked with Balkan crosses to distinguish them from American tanks. The 2nd SS Panzer Division famously used a captured Sherman to approach American positions at Manhay on Christmas Eve 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge. The American defenders, recognizing a Sherman silhouette in the moonlight, held fire until too late. The deception succeeded precisely because Shermans were common enough in German service that American forces had learned to be cautious. But most captured Shermans served in support roles: transport, reconnaissance, recovery, ammunition carrying. The reliability that made them inferior to Panthers in gun versus gun combat made them superior for every other task. A tank that runs reliably can perform support functions. A tank that breaks down constantly is useless regardless of its combat specifications. The German experience with captured Shermans revealed a truth that German military doctrine struggled to accept. Modern industrial warfare rewarded different qualities than previous conflicts had prioritized. Technical sophistication mattered less than logistical sustainability. Individual excellence mattered less than mass production. Maximum performance mattered less than reliable adequacy. These were difficult lessons for a military culture built on Prussian traditions of technical excellence and warrior elitism. German tank design reflected cultural assumptions about warfare that the 20th century had rendered obsolete. Tanks were envisioned as modern cavalry, elite formations conducting decisive operations through superior skill and equipment. This vision assumed wars of maneuver, decided by dramatic campaigns lasting weeks or months. The reality of World War II involved industrial attrition lasting years, where logistical systems and replacement capacity determined outcomes more than battlefield tactics. The Sherman succeeded not despite its modest specifications, but because those modest specifications were achievable, sustainable, and adequate for the war being fought. American industry could produce Shermans faster than Germany could destroy them. American logistics could supply them across global distances. American maintenance systems could keep them operational. American training pipelines could provide crews faster than casualties depleted them. These systemic advantages overwhelmed German tactical and technical superiority. The mathematical reality was brutal. Germany produced approximately 6,000 Panthers between January 1943 and April 1945. The United States produced 49,324 Shermans between February 1942 and July 1945. The numerical advantage alone was overwhelming, but operational availability compounded this advantage. Panthers averaged 35 to 40% operational availability in 1943, improving to perhaps 54% in 1944. Shermans maintained 70 to 80% operational availability throughout the war. This meant that a German panzer division with 96 Panthers nominally authorized could field perhaps 35 to 40 actually operational tanks on any given day. An American armored division with the same number of Shermans authorized could field 70 to 75 operational tanks. The numerical advantage of production was multiplied by the reliability advantage to create overwhelming battlefield superiority. German tankers who tested captured Shermans at Kummersdorf or used them operationally in combat understood these realities. Before German High Command fully grasped them, the careful technical reports filed by evaluation teams documented not just Sherman specifications but American industrial philosophy. The photographs of German soldiers examining War Daddy II at Kummersdorf captured a moment of Kummersdorf 23,000 self-recognition. Their enemy had developed weapons systems better suited to industrial warfare than Germany's technically sophisticated but logistically unsustainable designs. The journey of War Daddy II from Spitler to Kummersdorf paralleled Germany's journey from early war confidence to late war desperation. In February 1943, when this tank was captured, Germany still believed technical excellence could overcome numerical disadvantages. Panthers and Tigers were entering production. New weapons would restore German battlefield dominance. By late 1943, frontline reports made clear these new tanks, while impressive, could not reverse Germany's deteriorating position. The Sherman's success in Italy particularly troubled German planners because it occurred in terrain theoretically favoring the defender. Mountain warfare should have negated American numerical advantages. Narrow approaches, limited trafficability, commanding heights for defensive positions. These conditions should have allowed smaller German forces to hold against larger Allied armies. The Sherman's unexpected mountain climbing ability undermined these assumptions. Allied armour could support infantry attacks across terrain defenders had considered impassable. Part 2. The German 26th Panzer Division's report from the Po Valley in late 1944 described a tactical nightmare. Allied Shermans manoeuvred freely across open terrain, while German tanks remained confined to roads and trails. This wasn't theoretical analysis. This was operational reality reported by commanders watching their tactical flexibility evaporate. The Panther's wide tracks and interleaved road wheels, designed to provide superior flotation on soft ground, worked brilliantly in testing. In combat conditions with actual mud, the system became a liability. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Wet soil accumulated between overlapping wheels during cross-country movement. Overnight temperatures froze this mud solid. Morning found Panthers immobilized, crews frantically chipping ice from suspension systems while Allied forces advanced. The Sherman's simpler suspension accumulated less mud and cleared more easily. This seemingly minor difference shaped tactical outcomes daily. A tank that can move controls terrain. A tank frozen in place controls nothing. German tanker accounts from Italy describe growing appreciation for captured Shermans not through admiration of American engineering, but through recognition of German design failures. Veterans who had fought in Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs in France and Russia initially welcomed Panthers as superior weapons. Combat experience in Italy taught different lessons. The Panther's 75mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. This advantage proved meaningless when the Panther broke down before reaching firing positions or remained stuck on mountain roads, while Shermans outflanked German positions through supposedly impassable terrain. The fundamental problem was specification-driven design disconnected from operational reality. German engineers optimized for maximum performance in isolated categories: gun penetration, armor thickness, speed on test tracks. American engineers optimized for sustained operations under field conditions. The Continental R975 engine in the Sherman wasn't the most powerful engine available, It was the most reliable engine that could be mass-produced using existing industrial capacity and maintained with standard tools by mechanics with automotive training. This philosophical difference extended to every component. Sherman transmissions used proven truck technology rather than sophisticated new designs. The gun stabilization system was mechanically simple compared to later systems, but adequate for its purpose. The armor scheme used flat plates that could be cut and welded efficiently, rather than complex curves requiring expensive dies and skilled welders. Every design choice reflected the priority of fielding adequate equipment in decisive quantities, rather than perfect equipment in insufficient numbers. German military culture struggled to accept this approach as legitimate engineering. Prussian military tradition emphasized excellence, elite formations, technical superiority. The idea that adequate equipment, sustainably produced, could defeat superior equipment insufficiently available contradicted deeply held assumptions about warfare. German tank crews who captured and operated Shermans experienced cognitive dissonance. The Sherman was clearly inferior in specifications, yet it was also clearly more effective as a complete weapon system. The British evaluation of captured Panthers provided external validation of German reliability problems. After the German surrender in May 1945, British authorities commandeered a German Panther assembly facility and forced completion of 9 additional Panthers using existing components and German technicians. These British-built Panthers were intended for comprehensive testing under British evaluation protocols. Standard acceptance trials began in spring 1946. The trials had to be halted when mechanical failures disabled every Panther. The final British report, dated February 1948, stated explicitly that very little information of any value was obtained due to the general mechanical unreliability of the Panther and Jagdpanther tanks. Britain, with extensive automotive engineering capability and access to German technical documentation, could not keep Panthers operational long enough to complete testing. The French army reached identical conclusions through longer operational experience. France operated captured Panther units from 1946 through 1950, providing French tankers and engineers years of experience with German equipment. The official French Ministry of War report, titled Le Panther, published in 1947, documented systematic failures across all mechanical systems. The truly weak spot of the Panther is its final drive, which is of two-week design and has an average fatigue life of only 150 kilometers. Engine life averaged 1,000 kilometers. Transmission failures occurred frequently. The overlapping road wheel suspension collected mud and ice. Crew ergonomics were poor compared to Allied tanks. French conclusions were unambiguous. Despite impressive specifications, the Panther was unsuitable for sustained military operations. The resources required to maintain Panther units exceeded the combat value they provided. France discontinued Panther operations and focused procurement on more reliable designs. This evaluation by a nation with sophisticated engineering capabilities and no political incentive to favor American equipment over German confirmed what combat operations had already demonstrated. The Sherman was the superior weapon system when all factors were considered, not just gun and armor specifications. The contrast between American and German engineering cultures reflected broader differences in industrial organization and military doctrine. American automobile manufacturers had spent decades perfecting mass production techniques. Henry Ford's assembly line innovations, General Motors parts standardization programs, Chrysler's manufacturing efficiency. These civilian innovations transferred directly to military production. The Sherman was literally designed for automobile-style mass production. Components were standardized across variants produced by multiple manufacturers. A transmission from one factory fit a hull from another factory. A turret from American Locomotive Company matched a chassis from Chrysler. This interchangeability, being commonplace in automobile manufacturing but novel in military procurement, enabled unprecedented production rates. Ford's River Rouge plant transitioned from civilian automobiles to military vehicles using largely the same production methods. Workers who had assembled cars applied identical skills to assembling tanks. The learning curve was measured in weeks, not years. By 1944, American factories produced over 2,000 Shermans monthly at peak production, more tanks than German industry produced of all types combined. German tank production followed different principles rooted in craftsman traditions. Skilled workers fitted components individually. Tolerances were tighter, requiring more time and expertise. Each tank was partly custom work, even in series production. This approach produced excellent individual vehicles, but could not scale to wartime production demands. German factories required approximately 15,000 man-hours to produce a Panther. American factories required approximately 10,000 man-hours to produce a Sherman despite the Sherman's comparable complexity. The 50% labor advantage compounded across thousands of vehicles to create insurmountable production differentials. Germany dedicated proportionally more industrial capacity to tank production than America, but produced far fewer tanks. The mathematical impossibility of German victory emerged clearly from production statistics. Even if every German tank was tactically superior, Germany could not produce enough tanks to replace combat losses and equip new formations simultaneously. America could replace every Sherman destroyed and still expand armored forces. The fuel situation compounded German logistical problems. The Maybach HL-230 engine in the Panther consumed gasoline at rates German logistics could not sustain. Road consumption of 2.8 litres per kilometre meant a 100-kilometre road march consumed 280 litres. Cross-country consumption reached 7.3 litres per kilometre. The Panther's 730-litre fuel capacity provided about 260 kilometres range on roads, 100 kilometres cross-country under optimal conditions. The Sherman's Continental engine consumed approximately 0.6 litres per kilometre on roads, 0.9 litres per kilometre cross-country. With 635 litres fuel capacity, the Sherman achieved approximately 160 kilometres range cross-country, comparable to the Panther despite the Panther's larger fuel tanks. But German synthetic fuel production was approximately 6 million tons annually by 1944, barely 1/10 of American petroleum production. The Wehrmacht could not fuel the Panthers it possessed, even when mechanical reliability wasn't a factor. American logistics delivered fuel reliably across global supply chains. Liberty ships crossed the Atlantic. Pipelines were constructed across France following the Allied advance. The Red Ball Express truck convoy system delivered thousands of tons daily at peak operations. This logistical capability reflected American industrial capacity and organizational sophistication that Germany could not match. German logistics collapsed under Allied air interdiction and the destruction of transportation infrastructure. Even mechanically sound Panthers sat immobilized for lack of fuel. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 demonstrated these problems at operational scale. German forces committed 471 Panthers to the offensive, with 336 operational at start, a 71% availability rate representing exceptional preparation. Within 1 week, mechanical failures reduced operational strength by approximately 1/3 independent of combat losses. Panthers, abandoned for mechanical reasons, littered roads through the Ardennes. German recovery units could not retrieve disabled vehicles before American forces recaptured territory. Popular accounts attribute the offensive's failure to fuel shortages. This explanation is partially accurate but incomplete. Fuel shortages certainly constrained German operations, but mechanical unreliability of German armoured vehicles limited operational tempo, even when fuel was available. A Panther that breaks down after 150 kilometers because final drives fail provides no combat power regardless of fuel availability. The systemic unreliability of German armor shaped tactical possibilities as much as fuel constraints. American tankers facing Panthers in the Ardennes fought from disadvantageous tactical positions. The German offensive achieved surprise. American units scrambled to respond. German Panthers and Tiger IIs possessed overwhelming advantages in gun penetration and armor protection. Individual engagements often favored German forces, yet American forces recovered from initial defeats, stabilized the front, and counterattacked successfully. The decisive factor was not tactical skill or equipment quality, but systemic sustainability. American armored divisions suffered heavy tank losses during the Bulge fighting. Replacement Shermans arrived within weeks, often within days. Crews knew destroyed tanks would be replaced, encouraging aggressive tactics. German panzer divisions could not replace losses. Every Panther destroyed was gone permanently. Crews knew their tanks were irreplaceable, creating caution that undermined German tactical doctrine requiring aggressive exploitation. The psychological burden of fighting in irreplaceable equipment affected German combat effectiveness as much as material shortages. The 2nd Armoured Division's experience typified American advantages. The division entered Normandy in June 1944 with 132 Shermans. During the entire European campaign through May 1945, the division had approximately 648 Shermans completely destroyed and another 700 knocked out, repaired, and returned to service. This 580% loss rate sounds catastrophic. It actually demonstrates the Sherman's greatest strength. American logistics continuously replaced losses, maintaining divisional combat power throughout 11 months of sustained operations. German panzer divisions experienced declining strength throughout campaigns as losses exceeded replacement rates. The 5th Panzer Army in the West had approximately 600 tanks in June 1944 before the Normandy invasion. By December 1944, for the Ardennes offensive, German armoured forces in the West could muster approximately 1,500 tanks, only through desperate measures, stripping other theatres and rushing partially trained units to the front. This represented the maximum effort Germany could sustain. American armoured strength in Europe grew continuously from June through December 1944, despite heavy losses. The tactical implications shaped every engagement. American commanders could afford aggressive tactics knowing losses would be replaced. German commanders had to husband irreplaceable assets, creating defensive mentality even during offensive operations. The Bulge Offensive, Germany's last major attack in the West, began with clear German advantages in surprise, terrain, weather, and temporary numerical superiority. Within 2 weeks, American numerical and logistical advantages reasserted themselves. German forces lacked fuel, spare parts, replacement vehicles, and reinforcements. American forces received all these things continuously. German tankers, who had laughed at the Sherman's modest specifications during the war's early years, understood the bitter truth by 1945. The tank that looked inferior on paper dominated battlefields because it was actually present when needed. A Panther in a repair depot provides zero combat power. A Sherman on the battlefield, adequately armoured and adequately armed, decides engagements through presence and reliability. This lesson, learned at terrible cost by German armoured forces, shaped post-war military procurement worldwide. The human cost of German over-engineering extended beyond battlefield casualties to training and doctrine. Panther crews required months of specialised training to operate and maintain their complex vehicles. This training time was time Germany increasingly could not afford. As experienced crews were killed or captured, replacement crews received abbreviated training on equipment they barely understood. Poorly trained drivers caused mechanical failures through improper operation. Inexperienced crews abandoned repairable Panthers after minor breakdowns because they lacked knowledge to assess damage. Sherman crews could be trained to basic proficiency in weeks. The intuitive layout, automotive-style controls, and simple maintenance procedures meant minimally trained soldiers could operate Shermans effectively. This training efficiency mattered enormously as casualties mounted and fresh replacements arrived. An armoured force is only as effective as its least trained crews. American ability to rapidly train adequate crews maintained combat effectiveness despite personnel turnover. German inability to adequately train replacement crews progressively degraded combat effectiveness even when equipment was available. Soviet experiences with American-supplied Shermans provided additional perspective on German reliability problems. The United States provided over 4,000 Shermans to the Soviet Union through Lend-Lease, primarily diesel-powered M4A2 variants. Soviet tanker Dmitry Loza, hero of the Soviet Union, commanded Sherman-equipped units on the Eastern Front and documented his experiences extensively. His assessments provide valuable comparison since Soviet forces also operated captured Panthers alongside Sherman's. Loza praised Sherman reliability consistently. The service life of Sherman tracks exceeded 5,000 kilometers compared to Soviet T-34 tracks requiring replacement every 2,500 kilometers. The auxiliary generator eliminated the need to run the 500 horsepower main engine just to charge batteries, a significant operational advantage during winter operations. Sherman armor quality showed no interior spalling when hit, unlike Soviet cast armor. Crew stations were comfortable enough for sustained operations. General mechanical reliability exceeded Soviet equipment. Soviet technical teams evaluated captured Panthers and attempted to incorporate useful features into Soviet designs. They found little worth copying. The 75mm gun was excellent, but Soviet 85mm and 122mm guns were adequate for anti-armor missions. The sloped armor was admirable, but Soviet. Designers had pioneered sloped armor on the T-34. The final drives, transmissions, and suspension systems were deemed inferior to Soviet designs due to chronic reliability problems. Soviet forces occasionally used captured Panthers operationally when desperation or opportunity presented. A February 1945 Lower Silesian offensive saw Soviet 4th Tank Corps employ a captured Panther with an experienced crew for reconnaissance. At dusk, the Panther passed through forest, attacked from the flank, and destroyed 3 enemy Panthers in a short engagement. During retreat to Soviet positions, it was hit by German artillery and damaged. After the battle, the tank was written off due to lack of spare parts and maintenance problems. Even in skilled Soviet hands with experienced crews, captured Panthers proved unsustainable beyond single operations. The comparison between German Panther operations and Allied Sherman operations demonstrates the cumulative impact of places the 12, reliability on sustained campaigns. Germany produced approximately 6,000 Panthers between January 1943 and April 1945. Peak frontline strength reached 2,340 tanks on September 1, 1944. By March 15, 1945, only 361 Panthers remained operational from 740 total, a 49% operational rate. Many Panthers never reached combat units, abandoned during transport for lack of fuel or experienced crews. The United States produced 49,324 Shermans between February 1942 and July 1945. Operational availability remained high throughout the war. American armored divisions maintained combat readiness continuously. Replacement pipelines functioned reliably. Maintenance systems worked efficiently. This sustained operational capability, multiplied across dozens of armored divisions, operating simultaneously in Europe and the Pacific, created battlefield advantages that German tactical skill and technical sophistication could not overcome. Albert Speer's November 1944 report to Hitler represented official acknowledgement that German tank development had followed a flawed path. Panzer crews wanted lighter, more maneuverable tanks with adequate firepower, not heavier tanks with superior specifications that couldn't be sustained operationally. This admission from the Minister of Armaments confirmed what frontline soldiers already knew. The pursuit of technical perfection had produced weapons unsuited to the war Germany was fighting. The irony was profound. German engineering excellence created tanks admired even by enemies for their sophisticated design, powerful armament, and thick armor. Yet these same tanks lost the war because excellence in specifications meant nothing when vehicles couldn't reach battlefields, couldn't be maintained, couldn't be fueled, couldn't be replaced when destroyed. The Sherman, dismissed by German propaganda as crude American mass production, won through reliability, sustainability, and adequate performance sustained over years of global operations. German tankers who tested War Daddy II at Kummersdorf in 1943 saw the future clearly. Their reports documented not just Sherman specifications, but American industrial philosophy's superiority for modern warfare. Those reports circulated through German military bureaucracy, largely ignored by commanders who believed superior German equipment must eventually prevail. By 1944, frontline reality forced recognition that American methods were succeeding while German methods were failing. The photographs of German soldiers examining captured Shermans show thoughtful faces, concerned expressions, recognition that their enemy possessed advantages extending beyond numbers. The Sherman represented industrial warfare conducted with ruthless efficiency. Every component optimized not for maximum performance, but for adequate performance that could be sustained indefinitely. The high-mounted Continental engine, accessible through large rear hatches, the modular transmission that could be replaced in hours, the simple suspension requiring only basic tools for maintenance, the spacious interior allowing crew efficiency, the reliable electrical system powered by an auxiliary generator, the gun stabilizer enabling faster engagement, the escape hatches providing crew safety. None of these features individually dominated German equivalents. Collectively, they created a weapon system vastly more effective than specification sheets suggested. A tank is not merely gun, armor, and engine. A tank is a complete system requiring trained crews, maintenance support, fuel supply, ammunition logistics, replacement capacity, tactical doctrine, and strategic vision. The Sherman excelled in systemic integration. German tanks excelled in isolated specifications. Wars are decided by systems, not specifications. The Battle of Aracourt in September 1944 demonstrated American tactical superiority, despite technical inferiority. 4th Armored Division's 37th Tank Battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, operating from his Sherman Thunderbolt, engaged German forces, including newly arrived Panther-equipped units. Abrams went through 7 different tanks during the war, but always commanded Shermans. His battalion lost 14 Shermans while destroying 55 Panthers and Tigers. This kill ratio, favoring technically inferior American tanks, resulted from superior tactics, crew training, combined arms integration, air support, and artillery coordination. General George Patton called Abrams the world champion tank commander. Abrams achieved this distinction commanding Shermans, not Panthers or Tigers. His success validated American doctrine emphasizing the tank as one component of combined arms teams rather than as an independent war-winning weapon. German doctrine increasingly relied on tanks alone to compensate for declining infantry and artillery capability. This doctrinal failure compounded material shortages to accelerate German defeat. The Sherman's success in skilled hands demonstrated that adequate equipment properly employed defeats superior equipment poorly employed. Abrams understood Sherman limitations and avoided frontal engagements when possible. He used terrain for concealment, maneuvered for flank shots, called artillery on German positions, coordinated with infantry and tank destroyers. The Panther's superior gun and armor provided no advantage when attacked from unexpected directions by combined arms forces. German Panther crews often possessed superior technical training on their specific equipment, but lacked the combined arms coordination that American forces developed through extensive training and combat experience. A Panther, engaged by artillery, had no opportunity to use its superior gun. A Panther ambushed from the flank found its frontal armor irrelevant. A Panther immobilized by mechanical failure became target practice regardless of specifications. American doctrine and training exploited these vulnerabilities systematically. The evolution of Sherman variants demonstrated American adaptability that German tank development lacked. The basic M4 platform accepted continuous improvements. The 76mm gun provided better anti-armor capability from January 1944. Wet ammunition storage dramatically reduced fire risk. The HVSS suspension improved mobility. The jumbo variant provided assault tank capability. Specialized variants included flamethrower tanks, mine clearers, recovery vehicles, bridge layers, rocket launchers, and self-propelled artillery. This adaptability allowed the Sherman to serve in roles far beyond its original design. German Panthers could not be similarly adapted. The tight integration and complex systems meant modifications were impractical. The Panther was optimized for its original configuration and could not evolve. The Jagdpanther tank destroyer variant required extensive redesign. No recovery vehicle, no engineer variants, no specialized roles. The Panther's sophistication made it inflexible. The Sherman's simplicity made it adaptable. In prolonged industrial warfare, adaptability provides decisive advantages. Israeli forces recognized Sherman design soundness through decades of operational experience. Modified Shermans fought in the 1956 Suez Crisis, the 1967 Six-Day War, and the 1973 Yom Kippur War. The M51 variant, mounting a French 105mm gun, successfully engaged modern Soviet T-54, T-55, and T-62 tanks using heat ammunition. Israeli M51 Shermans served into the early 1980s and were sold to Chile, which operated them until 1999, with some remaining in reserves until 2006. This operational longevity from World War II through the Cold War demonstrates fundamental design soundness. The basic Sherman chassis proved capable of accepting improvements for 4 decades. No German World War II tank achieved similar longevity. The Panther vanished from service within years of war's end. The design philosophy that created the Sherman, emphasizing reliability and adaptability over maximum specifications, enabled continuous evolution. The design philosophy that created the Panther, emphasizing specifications over sustainability, produced a developmental dead end. The contrast between Sherman and Panther encapsulates broader lessons about military procurement, industrial warfare, and engineering philosophy. Technical excellence, disconnected from operational requirements, produces expensive failures that impress observers but lose wars. Adequate performance sustained reliably defeats superior performance achieved sporadically. Mass production of good enough equipment overwhelms small-scale production of perfect equipment. Logistical sustainability determines strategic outcomes more than tactical capabilities. These lessons, learned at terrible cost during World War II, shaped American military procurement for generations. Post-war tank development emphasized reliability as co-equal with firepower and armor. The M48 Patton tank, entering service in 1952, incorporated Panther analysis lessons into design requirements. The M60 continued this philosophy. The M1 Abrams, entering service in 1980, represents the culmination of Sherman design philosophy. Sophisticated technology integrated into reliable, maintainable, logistically sustainable systems. German tankers who drove War Daddy II at Kummersdorf climbed aboard, expecting to find crude American workmanship. They discovered instead a masterpiece of practical engineering, every component optimized for the war industrial nations would fight rather than the war military theorists imagined. They laughed initially at American simplicity, dismissing automotive-style engineering as unsophisticated. They stopped laughing when test results revealed the Sherman could climb slopes impossible for German tanks, when the engine ran thousands of kilometers without major maintenance, when transmissions shifted smoothly through hundreds of test cycles, when every system worked reliably under conditions that disabled German equipment. The Sherman climbing supposedly impossible slopes became metaphor for American industrial warfare's victory over German technical warfare. The steep slopes represented challenges that sophisticated German engineering claimed to have optimized for, yet could not overcome. The Sherman, with its modest specifications and practical design, simply climbed them. No complex analysis, no sophisticated solutions, no engineering excellence. Just reliable, adequate performance applied consistently until the war was won. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.